Happy Sunday, everybody. This is the segment of the show where we kind of sit and get ready, wait for the clock on the wall to strike noon Pacific time here in the U.S. We let all of the notifications go out and let folks get in, get settled. We've already got quite a few folks over here in the live chat. If you're watching this on replay, you can just go ahead and scrub through the video until the graphic you see on your screen disappears, and that's when we absolutely go live. But until then, we wait for that clock on the wall, and it's almost there. And that's when I reach over and push the button and say, "Hey y'all, happy Sunday. Glad to see a bunch of folks out here already. It's getting cold in this neck of the woods. It's another gloomy, rainy day here in southern Oregon. And basically, everything's wet. That's about it. So, it's good to see lots of folks out here in the chat already, ready to jump in and see what we can do here today. Who do we have here? Let's see. We have Ice Cream 62 joining us from Italy, doing very well, and hope you are the same. Steve Nealon over there at Harneal Media, webmaster to the stars, and sponsor of MarkLindsayCNC.com. If you're looking for a website, you want to set up a web store, start selling some of your items online, maybe create some merch, t-shirts, hats, coffee cups, etc. Steve is your man. Check him out over at harnealmedia.com. And Steve, if you want to throw a link to your website over there in the chat, perfect. There's a link down in the description of this video. But if you want to throw one in the chat, go for it. Let's see. Mark Kulig checking in from Chicago. Richard Poulin up there north of the border. Richard Weiss checking in. Paul Stewart and Richard Canton from Michigan. Mike Mazalik, I believe you're in Ohio. I may be wrong. I'm not sure. I don't remember. You told me, and I just can't seem to remember. Kurt Briegel from Wisconsin. Lewis Denton out in North Carolina. Steve Late checking in from the UK. Hope you're doing well. Hope you've about got a clean bill of health coming here pretty quick, I would imagine. Glad to see you're on the mend, though, for sure. Dave Krause, also in Michigan. How you doing today? Let's see. Lee Dale in Georgia. Lewis Denton is all happy because his Onefinity is scheduled to ship in, what's that, about 9 days? It's okay. It's okay. You know, don't start looking for the delivery trucks yet. But I know that feeling. Norman Peterson from down in my old stomping grounds down in Reno. Ayal Peleg checking in from Israel. Steve Perdue in Spring, Texas. Welcome aboard. And Dave Pingle down in South Milwaukee, Wisconsin. How goes it? How goes it? Michael Johnston in, I hesitate to say sunny Scotland. It's wintertime. We all know that doesn't happen. Jim Hester, cold in Kentucky. Yeah, I remember Kentucky winters. I do remember Kentucky winters. David Williams from, it jumped on me. David Williams from Mississippi. Haha. All right. See, John Sautier. Mark, we go through this every Sunday. Mark Przybylski. I'm going to get it wrong again. Dave Gatton, the man, the myth, the legend. Checking in from Gatton Central down there in Georgia. Jeff Rozak checking in from Arrowhead Stadium. Dude, if you are at Arrowhead Stadium, what are you doing on YouTube, man? I don't know. Okay, Drone Guy 26. I was dropped. Okay. That's an interesting name. Oh, man, I love some of the senses of humor here. And Grant joining us in from Ottawa, Canada. Let's see. Charles Wallace there in Waterloo, Illinois. Les Clemens from up the road from me in Salem. Hopefully keeping an eye on the politicians up there. Jeff in Arizona, JMJ Love Dance. How we doing today? Let's see. It jumped on me again. I start to scroll down just a little bit. And it just, pow, it just jumps. So let's see. Motorsport from Colorado. Jeff from Woody One out in Connecticut. Yeah, I imagine it's cold there too. Jeff Rozak says he's at Arrowhead Stadium for Sunday night football. I know there's a time difference, but it's noon here. Ain't you a little early? Okay, Mike Mazzala corrected me. Thank you. In Philadelphia. So let's see, David Blackburn in North Carolina also. I got to pick it up here because all I'm doing is reading names. Rob Sandstrom in Temecula, California. LB Sharp in Oklahoma. Complete discharge from the hospital on November 17th, says Steve Lake. Good, good. Glad to hear it. See, Mike Smith in Central Florida. Mr. Coffee Paul. Okay, welcome aboard. Scott Malak, Wisconsin. Joe Gonzalez in Texas. Richard Weiss, I already said hello to you, but hello again anyway. And Steve Nola in Australia. Jeff works for NBC. That explains it. I probably shouldn't call him out, but the owner of one of the groups I'm in on Facebook is he's a camera operator. I don't remember. I know he does some freelance work, but he also works for ESPN and a few other. He is based out of Oklahoma City, and he gets to go to all the good games and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's always something that I wanted to do, just never did. But what can I say? And let's see, David Doxbury checking in from Windsor, Ontario, and John Harold in Applegate, Oregon. Yeah, I know, John, we're still having problems with those notifications. One of the reasons why it's working erratically is I can't remember. I can't remember to send out the notifications. And that's on me. That's my fault. I got to make up a checklist for my Sundays. Okay, that does it. That should be all the opening stuff and all the opening statements. Once again, no video this morning. We have basically, I decided what I would do is pick a topic and just talk about it. And this week I had just enough questions about, I guess a lot of people are making the slot together Christmas trees and freestanding ornaments, etc. Because I had a lot of question about the fillet tool and a dog bone fillet and a T-bone fillet, which I have never really discussed. I did kind of show the fillet tool for creating a radius in one video, which I forgot to link. I'll make a note of it to myself. There we go. To put down in the description box of this video. I kind of briefly went into the fillet tool in a video I did about pattern making. I had fragments of a treadle from a spinning wheel from the mid-1800s. And I had to make a pattern out of that, scan it into the computer, touch it all up, redraw half of it, and then cut out that spinning wheel treadle. And I got into the fillet tool a little bit in that video, but I didn't get into dog bone or T-bone fillets. So I figured I would go ahead and do that now, and then we'll go ahead and get into some questions. And so let me go ahead and screen share here to show you kind of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these slotted Christmas tree projects like such, where you have two pieces. One is slotted through at the top, and the other is slotted through at the bottom, like so. They slip together like this, but they're just two pieces, one with the slot cut up to a certain point, and the other with the slot cut down to that same point. And people were having trouble with these corners here, in that, as you know, when you try to carve an inside cut like this, you've got the radius of the tool to deal with, so you end up with a rounded corner. And that is where the fillet tool come in. There are multiple ways you can handle these corners here. As you can see in this case, they used either a file or possibly a chisel to get in and clean out these inside cuts. Heck, you can use a jigsaw, a bandsaw, whatever, just to kind of file away and clean up the radiuses on these cuts. But some folks like to learn how to do all of this with the CNC. And this is where the fillet tool comes in. Now, what I did in that video about pattern making was I showed how to form a radius down here using a fillet tool. If, for instance, you have a design, there's an inside cut here, and you want, for example, a 1/2 inch radius here, you would select the vector that you want to apply the radius to, come over to the fillet tool, and if you wanted a 1/2 inch radius here, as an example, you would come up to the fillet or tool radius and enter that here, and we'll use just a normal fillet, and that is that type of fillet right there. Then come over into your drawing, and you'll see how my cursor is changed to a plus sign with that curve up above it. When you get that plus sign down into a corner where a fillet can be applied, you'll see that check mark appears. And then a click, and it applies that radius. And then come over here and do the same thing, and you can, apply whatever radius you would like. Now, if you decide you've made a mistake or you want to change it for some reason, if you come over here to that radius, you'll see how that curve changed to an angle, and the check mark is an X. I can click on that, and it'll return it to that 90-degree corner. Then I can make a change and then come back and apply that radius again. So that was the radius that was the fillet that I demonstrated before. Now, a dog bone fillet are used to create clearance inside of a vector like this. If you have, like in the case of our Christmas trees there, you're sliding a piece of material, and it's got a seat down at this bottom portion of our slot. And a dog bone fillet, again, we would come over here to the corner until we get that check mark, and what it does is it creates an overcut with the radius that we put in up here. Now that's a bit big, so let me go back here and undo these. If I'm using a 1/4 inch end mill, I would want to use a 1/4 inch end mill. Make sure I have dog bone fillet. Yes, there we go. And boom, there is my dog bone right there. It cuts out the material here in X to both sides, and it cuts the material in Y on both corners. And that's just simply carving away that material, getting rid of that radius, but it also cuts into the part. And that is a lot of times visible. Now, if it's something that you're going to be filling and painting, gluing together, a little bit of wood filler or wood putty right here, and you to go ahead and paint it, and that would cover that up. But it's basically the same as any other type of a fillet. The only thing is it makes an overcut in X on both sides and in Y on both sides. Now, a T-bone fillet is similar, but it does not make that overcut in Y. It just makes it in X. So if I come over here, T-bone fillet using the same radius, get over here in the corner, you can see it pops off to the side in X. Come over here, and it hops off to the side there. It will leave this area flat, so you don't have any filling to do here. But it does come out the tool radius in X on each side. And again, these are for inside corners, for cases or situations where you're going to be sliding one piece into another. Again, you will have that overcut out to the sides, but you can fill that if you plan on painting the item. It becomes a little harder to hide if you're going to be giving it a clear finish. I mean, you can find stainable, paintable wood putties, but to me, they just never really look right. So my personal opinion is, if I'm going to cut two pieces that slot together, I don't bother with these fillets. I go ahead and just use a file or my jigsaw, and I trim up that radius by hand. It just takes a couple of minutes. Now, something I don't know if I have ever seen it demonstrated or not is the plasma or drag knife fillet. Let me do something here, close this up, and I'll draw a quick rectangle here. And for those of you who have ever used a plasma cutter or a drag knife, you know that if you're cutting out, for instance, this square here, and the square is what you want to keep, and your mask out here is going to be the waste that's going to be thrown away, you know that you can get in here with the drag knife or with the plasma cutter. It's going to leave these corners connected slightly, because the drag knife will drag over here and then stop, change directions, and come this way. Well, the corners will stay attached because the blade has to change directions as it moves. Then if you're using a plasma cutter, you know that sometimes square corners like to stay attached and melt back together. Well, you can select the vector, come over here to the fillet, and these are external fillets. What they'll do is they'll cause the plasma cutter or the drag knife to go past the end, loop around, and then come back this way. So the blade direction change happens out here. And that's a simple select the plasma or drag knife fillet. And again, these are external fillets. You come up and you click on each of the corners. Come on, there we go. And now what happens is, from wherever the start point of that vector is, your drag knife is going to start out here a little bit and make that entire bottom end cut loop around this way, come back up and cut this direction. So if you're cutting vinyl or thin veneers with the drag knife, or you're using this to control a plasma cutter, you can get these nice square corners without that corner remaining attached via this vector and this vector. It's just a simple way of getting that knife direction changed so that it makes the complete cut. And again, this is assuming that this out here is going to be your scrap, and this is the piece that you want to save, to use for some reason. And It does work somewhat on text. You do have to be careful of which font you use. Let me draw another rectangle here. With it selected, I'll go into draw text. It's going to take it a second. It's got to load my fonts, and I have way too many fonts. Oh boy, do I have too many fonts. Come along, Aspire. Wake up. I need to get rid of some of these fonts. A lot of them I just do not use, but I kind of went a little crazy. Okay, so let's see. We will use, I'll just use a standard font like here, and I'll enter the letter T, and I'll close that. Now, if I want to fillet this letter T using the plasma or drag knife, you'll notice that the minute I clicked on the fillet tool, the T, it was deselected, and I'm not getting that check mark. If I want to use any kind of a fillet with text, I have to convert it to curves first. I cannot use a fillet with text, with a text object. If I select it, right click, convert to curves, now I can come up and what happened here? Okay, there we go. Yeah, now I can come up and I can create a fillet. Let's undo that. Do a plasma fillet out here, down here. But I can do a fillet on these inside corners, but the fillet's going to go inside the letter T. That's not what I want to do. Basically, the drag knife is going to still make that direction change right here. Because remember, these drag knife plasma cutter fillets are for external corners. They're not for internal corners. And that's what this is. Because again, this part here is what we're getting rid of. We're saving the letter T. So, basically, that is the use in a nutshell of the fillet tool. If you're going to be filleting text at all, you have to convert to curves first. And then you can come up here and, create a little bit of customization in a standard text font. Just kind of play around with it a little bit. Just another way of making something yours that used to be somebody else's. So, in a nutshell, that's using the fillet tool to either create a profile, a radius inside corner, to create clearance to allow two pieces to fit together, either using a dog bone or a T-bone fillet, or using the fillet tool for the drag knife or plasma cutter. So, I hope that kind of helps you out there. And if that is any help to you, I really hope it works. So, basically, you just position, as Mike Mazalik says, you position your cursor where you want the fillet, and that's exactly where it goes. So, alrighty, if there were any questions on the fillet tool, feel free to post them now, and we can answer any here. See, IL Peleg says, for the type of slide-in trees, would this not work better if the overcut be to the y-axis only? It can be put anywhere. You can put it on the X or the Y side. Michael is absolutely 100% correct. You just position your cursor where you want that fillet. And Jeff over there at Resorter 66 is absolutely correct. He says one thing you can do to lessen the overcut on fillets is to choose a smaller bit. That's absolutely right. If you choose a smaller bit, say an 1/8 inch end mill, that's going to make a smaller overcut than a 1/4 inch end mill is, for sure. I mean, you can get silly and go with a 1/16 inch bit if you'd like. Let me go back over into Aspire here, and you can get silly and go with very, very small bits if you'd like. Let me go ahead and get rid of these two fillets here and these fillets there. Let's see. I'll go with a T-bone here, and I'll make my tool radius 1/4 inch. You certainly can. Now, when you're using a T-bone fillet, for example, Eyal Peleg's question was, instead of coming out here to the side and making my fillets come out to the sides in Y, let me undo those. If you notice I come down here, you'll see I got that check mark and I'm nowhere near a corner. I can come down here and make those fillets in Y rather than making them come out the side in X. So Eyal is absolutely correct when referencing, whoops, wrong screen. That's what happens when you have too many windows open. When talking about this here, it would be better to use the T-bone fillets going up in this direction in Y. That would help to hide them. You might need a little bit of filler, you might not. It just depends. The whole point is to get rid of that overcut on the dog bone fillet. Now, a dog bone fillet, it doesn't matter where you go. Dog bone, not T-bone. It doesn't matter where you go. It won't let you go for a side. You have to be down in a corner because it's going to cut both in X and in Y. So for this type of a fillet, we're talking about the T-bone fillet only. So you can put it down towards the bottom of your slot, or you can put it off to the side of your slot. You can do both like that, but why you'd want to, I don't know. So that's what they were referencing there. And thank you for asking that, because I completely and totally forgot about that. So, but all in all, it's not a difficult thing to do. It's one of those cases of it being sometimes difficult to remember all of the options that you have available to us. I tend to use the fillet tool a lot for creating a radius on an inside corner because it's a quick, easy way of doing it. You know, I'll just draw a rectangle and do a little bit of trimming in node editing and then come along and I tend to use it for smaller radius, not with a larger radius. If I'm going something with like a 4-inch radius, I will go ahead and draw a circle with a 4-inch radius and then move it into position and then trim it up. But using that fillet tool is a quick, easy way of creating a radius in an inside corner. So I hope that helps out with that. It is one of those cases of a lot of things to remember when it comes to the number of options you have. But just remembering that a fillet will help you with clearance issues or creating a radius on an inside corner, that'll really goes a long way and really helps. So, okay, let's get into the further questions. There were some questions way up here. Go back and take a look. I just have to find them. Okay, let's see. Norman Peterson says, can an engraving tool such as Bits and Bits... Can an engraving tool such as a 30-degree Okay, 10 thousandths tip be used on hardwood? The answer is yes, it can. Engraving bits, here's the difference. And a V bit comes down to a sharp point. An engraving bit has a flat tip. And Norman's asking about a 30-degree V bit with a tip width of 10 thousandths. That's for making flat bottoms. The bit will plunge down as normal like any V bit, but rather than having that sharp point, it's got a flat tip with the width of 10 thousandths to carve a flat bottomed V. That's the difference between a V bit and an engraving bit. And he's asking if it can be used on hardwood. Yes, it certainly can. It certainly can. It's done quite often. So let's see here. I'm cruising through to see if there are any more. Okay, Mark Presbyszewski says, how does one price projects for sale? I'm a hobby woodworker just like you. This could be the subject of a video of its own because there is no easy answer. There is no cut and dried answer. There are probably just as many formulas for charging for your work as there are people out there charging for their work. I don't think I know two people who do exactly the same thing. Generally speaking, you've got a lot of things to look out for. You have your overhead, you have your costs, your materials, the shop, the tools, your talent, your labor. Do not forget to charge for those. I see people undercharging all the time. But the other thing you have to consider is your market. And if you've got something like if you're making cutting boards, you have to look at what other people in your area are charging for cutting boards. That has to be an influence. I'm not saying base your price on that, but it depends on what market you're going for. If you're trying to compete with the big box stores, you're going to lose. You cannot sell it for as cheap as they can. If you're going for a mid-range market, shop online, shop locally, and see what other people are charging for their work. That's about how I price mine. That's for standard items. If we're talking about custom work, I have always been a firm believer that the letter S in the word custom should be a $, because that's when they are paying for your creativity, your experience, your talent. It's very easy to come up with a template, a drawing in, for the sake of argument, a cutting board in the shape of the state of Oregon. That's very simple to do because you can make that artwork one time and you can cut 1,000,000 of them the same way every time. But it's when they start wanting inlays, be it a wood inlay or an epoxy inlay, or they want names on it, that's when they're going to pay for a little bit more creativity. Again, don't try to compete with the big box stores because you are going to lose. They will always be able to sell cheaper than you can because they're buying these things by the thousands, where you're making them one at a time. You don't want the big box store clientele. You want the clientele who wants to pay you for your time. Now, how much that is, that's open to discussion. Custom items and custom objects, there's a huge market for it. But there's also a huge amount of competition out there. And as lasers and CNC routers become less expensive to buy and get into, more and more people start doing it. And that drops the price. Basically, again, there's no cut and dried answer to tell you should price this. What you need to do is see what some of the others are charging for similar items. Write that down and set it aside, and then figure out what your expenses are to make it. And when I say expenses, I mean everything down to the electricity it takes to run your machine, the glue, the disposables, I mean the tape, the finish, whatever. Figure out what it's going to cost you to make that item, and then figure out a good labor rate for yourself. You have to pay yourself. You don't feed anybody by getting your money back. And I hate to hear that phrase when somebody says, well, I'll give you so much for it, you got your money back. I don't feed my family off of getting my money back, because I'll just save all the aggravation and not spend it to buy the materials to make it. Again, it's a complex issue, but seeing what others are charging in your area for something similar is a good place to start. And charge accordingly. I mean, if you're going to charge more than them, be better than them. You should try to be better than them anyway. But you don't really have to justify the price you're charging as much as you have to be as good as the price you're charging. So, and then again, there's always friends and family rate. If it's a good friend, I do a lot of stuff for my grandkids just because I like to. And same with my kids. There are friends and family who will get a cheaper rate than anybody else, but don't get in the habit of doing things for free. Getting in the habit of doing things for free is a slippery slope that will lead you to start to hate to work in the garage. Trust me, I know this. So, excuse me. See now, Jim Hester wants to know, is there a way in VCarve to deform text into an oval shape like in the Warner Brothers WB logo? Yes, there is, and that warrants a video of its own. So I'm going to go ahead and do a video on that. It won't be until after the new year, but I did do a video on distorting objects using the distort tool, but I will do one dedicated to text. I don't think I have done one now that I think about it, but I'm not sure. Something's telling me I did. I'll look, and if I did do one on distorting text like that, like you're talking about, I'll put it in the description. It might take a few minutes after we get finished being live here. But that does warrant its own video, so I will do a video on that. So let's see here. Let's see. We have Tomas Sabo says, I want to say thank you for the videos you upload. What would you do when the product order 3 times bigger than your machine work area? How would you join them? Oh, there are several ways of joining. Okay, the question basically is, you have something that's 3 times larger than your work area. Let's say, for giggles, that you have something that's 3 meters long and you have 1 meter that of work area. So you need to make something 3 meters long. You can, if you can flip everything over after you've cut the 3 pieces and apply a backer board, a solid backer board, that's probably the best way. You can also use like biscuits on the edges and butt them together on the edges and join them that way. Of course, I'm talking about from the back now. Biscuits, dominoes from Festool, dowels, pocket screws. If it's going to be installed, say a vertical wall panel, and it's going to be installed on the wall, you might not need to join them. You may be able to apply them to the wall and let that adhesive that holds it to the wall, make the connection, as it were. There are several ways of doing it. But that kind of gets back into uh, standard normal woodworking and the ability to join all of the materials together. It's a legitimate thing, but there are several ways of doing it. The Probably the easiest would be using biscuits or dowels on the edge of one and then corresponding holes or slots on the other, and then fasten them together that way. So, but I mean, there are a multitude of ways. Butterflies and pocket screws and even countertop connectors and thing of that nature. So, okay, I hope that helps, by the way. Let's see here. We're back into talking about we're talking about that there. All right. Jeff, Resorter66, have you ever used the dog bone gadget? No, I have not. I'll be honest with you. I have a bunch of gadgets downloaded and installed in Aspire, but I just don't use them. I find that I don't really need them. There are some things I think that would be kind of handy, but I have found how to, I can draw most things that I want to draw. And, it just, I just haven't found really the use for them yet. Um, as I get further into rotary axis projects, there are some gadgets for rotary axis that will come in handy. I just have to explore those a little further. I'm not real good with my rotary axis yet. I've only used it a couple of times. That's why I haven't really posted much about it. So let's see. Warren's Corner. Do you ever cut lexan? No. I want to make something from 1/8" lexan. How difficult would that be? Some V carving and some 1/8" end mill. I have never cut lexan. Now, lexan is a brand name. So you do need to look into that. Are we talking polycarbonate or are we talking acrylic? Because they do cut differently. So I don't cut plastics. I tried once many, many moons ago when I was first starting out and I didn't know what I was doing. I do plan on getting into some acrylics and other materials this year, but I have not done it yet. So I am the wrong person to ask that. If you're on Facebook, Warren, get into the Facebook group CNC for Beginners, plural. And ask your question over there. I know there are people over there that are cutting acrylics, lexan, polycarbonate, plexiglass, whatever you want to, perspex, whatever you want to call it. So, but I am the wrong person for that. Okay, Richard Canton says, can I make a line fatter? I need a 5/32 groove with a 1/8 bit. Cutting on the line. The only way, I'm going to put a link to it in the description. You have to remember how V carving works. And the way V carving works is the width of the line is determined by the depth of the cut. So you'll need to practice in a little bit of scrap. You can do a profile tool path with that bit. You're not, okay, you're not talking about a V carve. Never mind. You're just talking about making a 5/32 groove with a 1" just 1/8" end mill. Create a pocket. Don't you a profile. Create a pocket. No. Wait a minute. I'd have to sit and figure that out. You might have to create an inside and an outside vector. Yeah. I think you'd have to do an inside and outside vector. And then... Let me work on that. It's not coming to me right this second. Let me work on that, Richard. That might be that might be a good subject for next week. Let's see. Tell you what, shoot me an email through my website, marklindsaycnc.com. Hit the contact us page. Shoot me an email, and you and I will work on it together. Maybe I'll talk about that next week, because that is an interesting subject. I've got to get into the software. It's been a while since I've been in it. So, okay, let's see. Michael Mazalik, are we friends and family? We'll talk. You know. Fathi Osama says, are there chamfer bits for CNC? Any V-bit can be used as a chamfer bit. Depends on the angle of the V-bit and the depth of cut. So, you can, for instance, I use a 90-degree V-bit to give a 45-degree chamfer around the edge of something I'm cutting out, especially round parts, like say a clock face. You have a round clock face. I will draw my profile for profile cutout, my vector for the outside of the clock, and then I'll use a 90-degree V-bit going a 1/4 inch diameter and machine on the vector. And that puts that 45-degree chamfer all the way around the edge of it. Then when I cut it out, I cut to the outside of that vector. And it works. So, let's see. Yeah, okay. Mike Mazalik just come along and said, and he's absolutely right, the thing is, I didn't want to experiment live and be wrong. So, whoops, hit the wrong one there. So if we come up here, for instance, to this rectangle, let's forget about this letter T for a minute here. This rectangle, I wanted to make a, what did you say, a 5/32, a 5/32 wide. You would do a offset positive and negative. So we come over here to the offset tool, and we want to offset outwards. Now, 5/32, I don't know what the decimal equivalent is right off the top of my head. So we'll say 5/32 tap equals, but that's the total width of the offset we want. We don't want to go 5/32 this way, 5/32 that way. We want to go half of this. So we'll go divided by 2 equals, and that gives how far we want to go to each side. Offset inward and outward. Create sharp offset corners. I'm going to delete the original, and I'll offset. Then there we go. That gives us, if we measure, let's go from that line to that line, and that gives us the distance of our 0.1563. There's our 5/32. So, like I said, thank you, Michael. I did not really want to experiment with that with it being live and then be wrong. But I thought that would work. So, yeah, basically, figure out the final width you want, and then select the vector, offset both half of that final measurement that you want. So, okay. I hope that answers that. So let me get back over here to where you guys are, so I can see if there are any other questions. Let's see. What do you want? What about carving the project in one piece and doing pull downs? I don't understand. I imagine you're talking about the creating a project that's 3 times bigger than your machine capacity. But explain what a pull down is. I may not be familiar with that particular phrase. Let's see now. Grant says, for what it's worth, I cut lexan frequently. Okay. I use an 1/8 inch O flute bit, slow feed and slow speed on my router. Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool. Yeah. And that's the main reason why I don't try to cut plastics or acrylics, is simply because I'm using a router on my CNC. And the CNC, the router just simply cannot be slowed down enough. I mean, I can slow it down to 12,000 RPM, and that's as slow as it'll go. A spindle will spin much slower than that. So using a router to cut lexan or acrylic or something like that, you'd have to speed up the feed rate so fast. You start talking about bit deflection and using coolants and things like that. It's better to slow down the RPM. Excuse me. It's better to slow down the RPM so you can run a normal feed rate and not worry about heat buildup. And that's the reason for the O flute bit. The O stands for open. You have one large open flute, and its entire reason for living is to throw those chips out, to evacuate those chips before they have a chance to heat up to the point to where they melt and start sticking. Because that is the nemesis when it comes to carving plastics, is heat buildup. You got to eject that chip with the heat and hope the heat goes with it. So you prevent heat buildup that'll melt that plastic. So, okay. Oh, okay. Michael Mazalik comes back and says, I was thinking the offset would be in the tool path. Yeah, you could do a negative and a positive offset. I see what you're getting at. I just kind of make the vectors the size I want them to be. So, okay, let's see. There's probably, it's Vectric, VCarve, Aspire, Cut 2D, Cut 3D. They're Windows programs. And if you've been around Windows for more than a day or two, you know there's probably 100 ways of doing exactly the same thing. And none of them are right or wrong. They're just different. So, okay, it looks like, oh boy, this has been almost an hour. I wanted to try to keep these down. Let's see. It's, basically, I'm going to go ahead and stop taking questions right now. I want to go ahead and get this done. As far as using the fillet tool, get in and play with it is about the best thing I can say. You'll find all kinds of options. Jeff Resorter 66 is absolutely right. The smallest bit you can get away with, if you have to use a T-bone or dog bone fillet, is the better way to go. And if you can keep that T-bone fillet in the Y direction, that'll help hide those fillets so that, it is basically invisible. So, all right, let's see. Yes, exactly. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As soon as I get finished here on live, I will go back in and I will find the distort text video if I made one. I know I did distort objects, but I will try to do an oval just to show how that can be done. For some reason, I'm thinking I already did it. If I did one, I will put a link to that in the description of this video as soon as we're finished live. And let's see, what else did I have? If not, that will be a good video on its own. So, Want to say thank you, everybody. For those of you who have asked, I did do a little bit with the shop this week. All I did was I rented the plate compactor and finally got that gravel pad compacted. You'll see that at the beginning of the next update, which will be down the road. So, no real huge news on that front. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for spending part of your Sunday with me. Now, go out and do something. Get out of the house. Make some chips. Shovel some snow. Anything. Or just shoot NFL football if you're in such a position. Times is hard, isn't it? Y'all take care.